Hey guys, it's Sam and welcome back to another critique video. For this critique video, I'll be critiquing Pezwolf's artwork they sent in. They mentioned quite a few things, so I'll try to address as much as possible. So let's just go ahead and get started. So one of the pros that I like to mention is getting out of your comfort zone and trying something new. This was a new experiment for them. They were trying a lot of new things, and that's awesome. Thumbs up, keep it up. Experimenting is a surefire way to improve faster, so props on that. And you mentioned using references to help you out, and that's great as well. They can show you what things are supposed to look like and help increase your visual library. Though you mentioned concern about it being a crutch, but I think it's better to view it as the more you use references, the more you'll learn how to look at things and the more you'll be able to do stuff without them. I don't think the goal should have to be that you will never use references again, because using references isn't a bad thing. If you're still worried, you can try mixing things up, do some things with reference, some things without, or use references in a different way. Like if you have a picture of a person, try drawing that same person from a different angle, etc. I also really like your line work. I think you have a nice job with the detail, like this section right here looks really cool. And it just seems like a really fun scene. So let's go ahead and look at some things that we can improve. So I'm going to go ahead and turn your piece in black and white. Changing your picture to black and white can help you gauge how well your contrast is. A higher contrast piece with stronger darks and lights is more appealing to the eyes and can make a piece more interesting. It also helps your character pop out a bit stronger against the background, because the background's not really what's important for this piece, it's the character that's important. And here's just me doing a little play around with contrast. I talk about this in a couple other critique videos as well as a mini tutorial, so I'll go ahead and link those down below. And you can check those out for more information on values. And I noticed you stated in your submission that you used specific brushes for these bushes. And you also said like the certain program that you used was kind of limited on brushes, so this was what you could do with them. And I kind of have mixed feelings about it, but it's super personal preference, so take this with a grain of salt. But from my experience and from what I've seen from other digital artists, specifically those who are newer to more advanced programs that have things like fancy brushes, they tend to rely a lot on using those brushes to get the textures or the realism or whatever, instead of actually painting it themselves. Now, inherently, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does come with a couple problems. It can act as a serious crutch for not actually learning how to paint, so you're not really learning like the foundations or the fundamentals of, for example, bushes or grass. Instead, you're kind of just relying on this brush to do this work for you. That's not necessarily a bad thing, like I said. It's just that you kind of have a clash of painting styles, and typically with those less experienced, it stands out. So as an example, this is an older artwork of mine. I drew this long time ago, and right away, hopefully you can see what I'm talking about down here. I used one of the default brushes that Photoshop had for grass, and it is deathly obvious. It just doesn't really match the rest of the picture, and it just kind of looks awkward. Like you look at it and you know you use the grass brush. It just doesn't integrate well with the picture. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't necessarily have to be realistic, but it doesn't seem to fit. Just from what I've noticed with beginners with digital artwork is that they tend to just be like, oh, this is a quick, easy way for me to get this done, and then I don't have to worry about it. And just from my own personal experience, I didn't really like this grass, and I didn't really like the things that I did using those brushes, but I was either too lazy, or I didn't want to learn, or I didn't know how to do it otherwise. So here is another example of an artwork I did last year. Now in this artwork, I did use fancy brushes. I know it's probably hard to see because I had a dark phase back then, and so I upped the levels a bit, and you can kind of see things a little bit more clearly. But you know, these aren't the normal like flat round brushes. They have some texture to them. You can even see it down here. But it works better because you can see how it matches the rest of the piece. Like there's texture everywhere. It sort of fits in. I knew better what I was doing, and I was able to more utilize the brushes to the more fuller extent. So I'm not trying to say don't use fancy brushes, and I'm not trying to tell beginners to stay away from them. I'm just telling them to think more conscientiously about it. And don't think that you need fancy brushes to do fancy things. I just know from my own experience that I downloaded every brush I saw and I didn't know what to do with them, and I tried using them everywhere and it just got overwhelming. So I think especially if you're new to digital artwork, just try out a couple brushes to get used to the program and used to the whole system of those brushes, and then, play around, experiments with other fancy brushes later. So totally nothing wrong with you doing what you did. I just think maybe in the future, think about the decisions, why you're doing them, and maybe even do studies where you have pictures of bushes or other foliage and you use these fancy brushes to try and emulate those textures. And I think that would help you a lot more than just kind of guessing and thinking that, oh, this fancy brush will just get it across. Hopefully that point makes sense. I mean, if this is the look you're going for and this is what you wanted, or if that's just the kind of thing that you like, I'm not trying to change your mind here. So if this is what you wanted, then that's great. But in case you didn't want that and you wanted something a little bit more realistic, or you want to kind of understand it a little better, hopefully that kind of gives you some food for thought. Then the next thing I wanted to mention was the second panel where he's like, whoa, I'm flying, really flying. That's an exciting scene. That's like, oh, wow, he's finally done this thing and this is amazing. It falls a little bit flat to me, mostly because of how close the background is to him. And also just that he's kind of lower down and it just doesn't feel, I think, as exciting. Maybe it's kind of like a too soon celebration. So I think if you want to make this, push this a bit more and make it more powerful, I did a quick junky paint over, excuse the mess, but I tried to push the background just a little bit further away from him and kind of, I added some clouds. I don't know how tall this mountain is or whatever this is. Added some clouds to make it seem like, oh, wow, he's really high, and just try and really be like, wow, he's really flying. And I think that just kind of pushes it a bit more. So you have like really close to the background and then just further away. And I also cut off this part right here so you'd have sky to kind of show like he's passing by this mountain cliff thing. So getting in some distance, I think, could help really emphasize the fact that, wow, he's flying. And then just a couple of suggestions. I'm not a comic artist, so my expertise there is a bit limited. But you did mention that you were thinking of breaking up the jumping into 3 panels at the top, but then you wanted to emphasize more the fact that, oh, he's flying. And I agree with that. I think that's a good decision. The flying bit is definitely the more important aspect, but if you wanted to try and build up some more anticipation and some energy, I think you could have split this up into 2 panels and kept the height just the same. So maybe you could have had this in panel 1, and then maybe panel 2, you could have like more emphasis on perhaps him pushing up with his legs, and then you get the final flying panel. And another suggestion is the speech bubble size. I'm not too familiar with comics, like I said, but I would perhaps consider playing around with the size of the speech bubble and text personally, and make this one maybe a bit smaller. Maybe, move this one up so like you can show off more of the background. But if you haven't already, I definitely recommend just Google searching comic design and seeing what comes up. I know there's like a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it, and I know almost none of it. So research is very important. But definitely don't feel like once you've laid something down, you can't change it. That's not the case at all. Like if you don't feel like it works there, then maybe try it over here or over here. Just before you say the picture is done, I would say take 5 minutes and just move some stuff around and see what looks best. Maybe even walk away for like 30 minutes, an hour, and then come back, see how you feel. But yeah, this is a really fun piece. I like the energy and I like the emotion that comes off of it. It's really fun. I definitely see some potential. I really hope that you play around with brushes and with some composition. You're definitely going strong. Just keep at it. So social media pages for Pezwolf are in the description if you'd like to check out more of their work. And I'll also have links to the critique playlist if you'd like to see my past critique videos. And if you'd like to see my future videos, feel free to subscribe. And I hope this helped. So thanks so much for watching. Bye!